The red didn't dance or shake. It sat perfectly still on the white icing of the wedding cake, right between my name and hers. Most people would have thought it was a laser pointer from a prankster kid, but I spent 12 years in the Navy SEALs. I know the difference between a toy and a target designator, and I knew exactly what was coming next. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. They say your wedding day goes by in a blur. They tell you to stop and smell the roses because before you know it, the music stops and the lights go up. But my wedding day didn't blur. Every second of it is burned into my memory with terrifying clarity. I remember the smell of the ocean breeze coming off the cliffs. I remember the way the silk of Tessa's dress rustled against the floor. And I remember the look in her mother's eyes when she raised a glass to toast us. It wasn't a look of love. It was a look of finality. I'm Hunter. For a decade, my life was simple. Deploy, complete the mission, come home, repeat. I lived in the shadows. I was comfortable in the dirt and the noise of war. But standing there in a $5,000 tuxedo, surrounded by high society elites who looked at me like I was the waiter, I had never felt more exposed. Tessa squeezed my hand. Her fingers were warm, her smile radiant. She was the only pure thing in this entire estate. "You okay?" she whispered, leaning in close so the guests couldn't hear. "You look like you're scanning for snipers." I forced a laugh, but the hair on the back of my neck was standing straight up. "Just nervous," I lied. "Big crowd." But she wasn't wrong. I was scanning. It's a habit you don't lose just because you retire. And something about this wedding felt wrong. It started with the venue. Tessa wanted a small beach ceremony, but her mother, Fiona, insisted on hosting it at her private estate. The manor, as she called it, was a sprawling fortress of stone and glass sitting on a remote hill, miles from the nearest town. It was beautiful, sure, but tactically, it was a nightmare. High walls, limited exits, and surrounded by thick forest on three sides. Perfect for privacy, or perfect for a trap. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the speakers. The crowd quieted down. Fiona stood at the head table, tapping a spoon against her champagne flute. She was a striking woman, I'll give her that. Sharp features, ice blonde hair, and eyes that could freeze water. She wore a red dress that looked more like a declaration of war than wedding attire. "I'd like to say a few words," Fiona said, her voice smooth as velvet but cold as steel. Tessa squeezed my hand tighter. She desperately wanted her mother's approval. She wanted this day to heal the rift between us. But I knew better. Fiona didn't just dislike me because I came from nothing. She hated me because I saw through her. I knew about the creative accounting in her late husband's estate. I knew she was bleeding Tessa's inheritance dry to fund her lavish lifestyle. "To my daughter, Tessa," Fiona began, raising her glass. "My beautiful, naive flower. You always followed your heart, even when it led you off the path." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. That was a dig at me. And to Hunter, she turned her gaze to me. It wasn't a smile. It was a predatory bare of teeth. "The soldier. You've survived so much, haven't you? War zones, bullets, bombs. It's a miracle you're still standing here today. Truly." She paused, and the silence stretched out a second too long. "But everyone's luck runs out eventually," she finished softly. "To new beginnings. And final endings." "Cheers," the crowd mumbled, confused by the dark tone. I didn't drink. I set my glass down and scanned the perimeter again. That's when I saw him. By the garden entrance, there was a security guard. Fiona had hired a private firm for the event, claiming she wanted to keep the paparazzi out. But this guy, he didn't move like a rent-a-cop. He was standing in parade rest, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind his back, chest out. His eyes weren't watching the guests. They were watching the exits. I looked at his neck. A small tattoo, barely visible above his collar. A winged dagger. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a security firm logo. That was a unit insignia. Mercenary work. Private military contractors. I looked to the left, near the kitchen doors. Another guard. Same stance. Same dead-eyed stare. He wasn't watching the waiters. He was checking his watch, counting down seconds. There were 5 of them. I counted 5 distinct positions. They had formed a perimeter. They weren't keeping people out. They were keeping us in. Hunter. Tessa tugged on my sleeve. It's time to cut the cake. I snapped back to reality. Tessa, listen to me, I said, keeping my voice low and urgent. Is there a gun in the house? Does your mother keep a weapon? Tessa frowned, looking confused. What? No. Hunter, stop it. You're scaring me. It's just cake. Come on. She pulled me toward the center of the patio. The massive, 4-tier cake stood there like a monument. The photographer, a nervous guy named Julian. No, not the photographer. Julian was the best man. My mistake. Julian was standing next to the cake, holding the serving knife. Julian, the family lawyer. The guy Fiona wanted Tessa to marry. He was sweating profusely. It was a cool evening, maybe 65 degrees, but Julian looked like he was standing in a sauna. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He handed me the silver cake knife, his hand trembling so bad, he almost dropped it. Congratulations, Julian muttered. He looked sick. Thanks, Julian, I said, taking the knife. It was heavy. Sterling silver. Dull edge. Useless in a fight. I stepped up to the cake, wrapping my arm around Tessa. She leaned her head on my shoulder, blissful, happy. The flashbulbs popped. The crowd cheered. Okay, look right here, the photographer yelled. And that's when it happened. I looked past the photographer, past the smiling guests, toward the dark tree line of the forest surrounding the estate. A glint. Just a tiny flicker of reflection. Glass. A lens. My brain processed the geometry instantly. Elevation, 20 feet up in the old oak tree. Distance, 200 yards. Wind, negligible. I looked down at the cake. A tiny red dot appeared on the white frosting. It hovered there for a split second, then drifted upward. Ideally, it was aiming for my chest. But because I had leaned down to kiss Tessa, the angle was off. The dot moved across the icing. It moved across the silver knife in my hand. It stopped right over my heart. Adrenaline dumped into my system like ice water. The world went into slow motion. I could see the individual bubbles in the champagne glasses. I could see the fake smile plastered on Fiona's face as she watched us from the head table. She wasn't looking at the cake. She was looking at the tree line. She nodded. Once. A barely perceptible dip of her chin. It was the signal. I didn't think. I didn't explain. I just reacted. Down. I warred. I tackled Tessa. I didn't gently push her. I slammed my shoulder into her waist, driving her to the stone patio floor with all my weight. Cracked THWIP. The sound was distinctive. A suppressed high-caliber rifle round. It hissed through the air where my chest had been a millisecond ago. The bullet slammed into the wedding cake. The top 2 tiers exploded in a shower of fondant and sponge. The force of the impact was so violent it knocked the table over. Silence. For one heartbeat, there was absolute silence. The guests stood frozen, staring at the destroyed cake, not processing what had just happened. Then, the second shot. This one wasn't suppressed. It came from the security guard by the gate. He pulled a submachine gun from under his jacket and fired a burst into the sky. Everyone on the ground. Now, he screamed. Chaos erupted. Screams tore through the air. Tables were overturned. Glasses shattered. The wealthy elites of the city scrambled over each other like rats in a flooding basement. Hunter, what's happening? Tessa screamed, struggling under my weight. She was crying, confused, terrified. Stay down. I pressed her head against the concrete. Crawl. Toward the house. Move. I looked up. The lights in the garden suddenly cut out. Fiona had killed the power. Darkness swallowed the patio, lit only by the frantic moonlight and the muzzle flashes that were about to start. I grabbed the only weapon I had. The silver cake knife I was still clutching. Get inside. I hissed at Tessa. Don't stop for anything. My mother, she cried out. We have to help my mother. I looked across the panicked crowd. I saw Fiona. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't running. She was standing calmly by the service entrance, flanked by two of the mercenaries. One of them handed her a radio. She looked right at me, through the chaos, and smiled. She didn't hire them to protect the wedding. She hired them to turn it into a funeral. Your mother is the one holding the gun, Tessa, I said, my voice cold. I grabbed my wife by the wrist and dragged her into the shadows just as the ground around us erupted in dust. The sniper had adjusted his aim. The hunt was on. Move, Tessa, move, I shouted over the sound of screaming guests. Another bullet chipped the stone pillar next to my head, sending sharp fragments of masonry into my cheek. I didn't flinch. Pain was information, nothing more. Right now, the information was clear. We were being herded. The open-air patio was a death trap. The sniper in the tree line had a clear field of fire, and the mercenaries on the ground were funneling the panicked crowd toward the main gate. But I knew better. You don't push a crowd toward an exit unless you plan to mow them down there. It's a classic ambush tactic, the fatal funnel. Not that way. I yanked Tessa back, just as she tried to run toward the driveway. But the cars, she sobbed, her white dress already stained with dirt and frosting. Hunter, the cars are that way. They'll kill us before we even touch the door handles, I said, dragging her toward the heavy oak side doors of the manor. Inside. Now. We scrambled over overturned chairs and shattered glass. I kept my body between her and the shooters, moving in a zigzag pattern. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs, thud, 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 but my mind was icy cold. Assess. Adapt. Survive. We burst through the side doors into the kitchen, and I slammed the heavy deadbolt shut behind us. The noise of the chaos outside instantly muffled, replaced by the humming of refrigerators and the sound of our own ragged breathing. The kitchen was massive, an industrial stainless steel labyrinth designed to feed hundreds. It was dark, illuminated only by the emergency exit signs casting an eerie green glow over the countertops. Tessa collapsed against a prep table, hyperventilating. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terror that broke my heart. Hunter, you said my mother. She couldn't even finish the sentence. The betrayal was too big for her mind to process. Why would she do this? Why? I didn't have time to comfort her. Not yet. I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. Tessa, listen to me closely. We have maybe 30 seconds before they breach that door. I need you to bury that feeling. Bury it deep. You can cry later. Right now, I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me? She stared at me, trembling, then swallowed hard and nodded. Okay. Good girl. I let her go and immediately started scanning the room. We were trapped. The manor was built like a fortress, which meant it was hard to get into, but also impossible to get out of if you didn't have the keys. The windows were reinforced storm glass, bulletproof against small arms, but not unbreakable. The security team would have the master keys. I needed a weapon. The cake knife in my hand was better than nothing, but against body armor and assault rifles, it was a joke. I scanned the knife rack on the wall. Chef's knives. Boning knives. Sharp, dangerous, but short range. Then I heard it. The sound of boots on gravel outside the kitchen door. Then the mechanical click-clack of a lock being picked. They were here. Hide. I whispered to Tessa, pointing to the walk-in pantry. Go to the back. Do not make a sound. Do not come out unless I call your name. She hesitated, looking at me with terrified eyes. Go, I hissed. She scrambled into the pantry and pulled the door shut, leaving it cracked just a hair so she could see. I killed the emergency lights by smashing the plastic casing with the hilt of the cake knife, plunging the kitchen into near-total darkness. I moved silently to the corner of the room, behind a stack of metal shelving units. I slowed my breathing. I became part of the shadows. The lock on the exterior door clicked open. The door swung inward slowly. A silhouette appeared in the frame. He was big, bulky. Even in the dark, I could see the outline of a tactical vest and the long barrel of a suppressed carbine. He didn't rush in. He pied the corner, slicing the pie, checking his angles like a pro. This wasn't a thug. This was an operator. He stepped inside, his boots making almost no sound on the tile. He raised his weapon, scanning the room with a mounted flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping over the prep tables, the stoves, the sink. Sweep left, sweep right. I held my breath. I was 5 feet away from him, crouched behind a rack of pots and pans. If he checked his 6, I was dead. He tapped his radio. Kitchen clear. Moving to secure the hallway. His voice was deep, gravelly. American accent. He took another step forward, lowering his weapon slightly. That was his mistake. Complacency kills. I didn't lunge. I exploded. I sprang from the darkness, closing the distance before he could raise his rifle. My left hand clamped over the muzzle of his gun, pushing it away from me, while my right hand drove the silver cake knife downward. But he was fast, faster than I expected. He blocked my strike with his forearm. The metal of his bracer clanged against the silver. He didn't panic. He just reacted, driving a knee into my gut. The air left my lungs in a painful whoosh. I stumbled back, gasping. He brought the rifle stock around, aiming for my head. I ducked, the heavy polymer slamming into the metal shelf behind me with a deafening clang. Pots and pans crashed to the floor, the noise echoing like a bomb going off in the silence. I didn't wait for him to recover. I drove my shoulder into his midsection, tackling him into the stainless steel island. We both went down, crashing onto the hard tile floor. The rifle skittered away into the darkness. Now it was hand to hand. He was stronger than me. He roared, grabbing my throat with a gloved hand and squeezing. His grip was like a vice. Black spots danced in my vision. I clawed at his face, trying to find eyes, nose, anything soft. He punched me, a short, brutal hook to the ribs. I felt something crack. Die, you piece of trash, he growled, reaching for a combat knife on his vest. I couldn't let him draw that blade. If he got it out, it was over. I used the last of my oxygen. I bucked my hips, throwing him off balance just enough to loosen his grip on my throat. I sucked in a desperate gasp of air and grabbed his wrist, pinning it to the floor. He headbutted me. Stars exploded in my eyes. Blood filled my mouth. He was going to kill me. He was going to kill me right here on the kitchen floor while my wife watched from the pantry. No. I remembered the training. Violence of action. Dominate the space. I let go of his wrist and jammed my thumb deep into the soft spot under his jaw, pressing on the nerve cluster. He gagged, his strength faltering for a split second. I grabbed a heavy cast iron skillet that had fallen during the struggle. I didn't think. I swung it with every ounce of hate and fear in my body. Crack. The skillet connected with the side of his helmet. It didn't knock him out, but it dazed him. He slumped sideways. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I scrambled on top of him, grabbing the cake knife from where I dropped it. It was bent, the silver twisted from the impact, but the point was still sharp. He looked up at me, his eyes clearing, reaching for his sidearm. I drove the knife down. Once. Twice. He stopped moving. I collapsed on top of him, my chest heaving, blood dripping from my nose onto his tactical vest. The silence rushed back into the room, heavier than before. I checked his pulse. Nothing. I rolled off the body and sat there for a second, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I had killed men before. In the desert. In the mountains. But this was different. This was in my home. At my wedding. I crawled over to the body and started stripping his gear. I needed everything. Tessa. I croaked, my voice raw. The pantry door creaked open. Tessa stepped out. She was pale as a ghost, her hands covering her mouth, staring at the dead man on her kitchen floor. Is he? She whispered. He's gone, I said, unbuckling the mercenary's gun belt. I checked the pistol. ASIG Sauer P226. Full magazine. One in the chamber. Good. I found the rifle under the table. And 416 Hong Kong dollars. Short barrel. Suppressed. Professional kit. I stood up, wincing as my cracked rib protested. I handed Tessa the pistol. Take this, I said. She recoiled. I can't. I don't know how to use that, Hunter. You point it, and you pull the trigger, I said, shoving it into her hand. Safety is off. Don't touch the trigger until you're ready to kill someone. Do you understand? She took it, her hands shaking so bad the gun rattled. But she held it. I put on the mercenary's radio headset. Static hissed in my ear. Unit 1. Report. A voice crackled. Did you clear the kitchen? Over. I froze. I knew that voice. It wasn't a man's voice. It was Fiona. I looked at Tessa. She heard it too, coming from the earpiece. Her eyes filled with tears, the reality finally crashing down on her. Her own mother was on the radio, checking to see if her son-in-law was dead yet. I pressed the transmit button. Unit 1 is offline, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Silence on the other end. Then, Fiona's voice came back, devoid of any emotion. Kill him slowly, and bring me the girl alive. I need her signature on the trust transfer before we dispose of her. Tessa let out a choked sob. The gun in her hand dipped. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was total. She was going to kill me, force Tessa to sign over the fortune, and then dispose of her own daughter. I looked at the radio. Come and get her yourself, Fiona. I ripped the earpiece out and crushed it under my boot. We have to move, I said, grabbing the rifle. They know I'm alive. The rest of them are coming. The kitchen door leading to the hallway rattled. Someone was trying to kick it down. Upstairs, I ordered. To the wine cellar. Move. The kick at the door was heavy, vibrating the hinges. Dust fell from the frame. They weren't picking the lock anymore. They were breaching. Go. I shoved Tessa toward the service stairs. Get to the second floor. Don't stop. She scrambled up the narrow wooden steps, her heels discarded somewhere in the chaos, running barefoot. I lingered for a second, aiming the suppressed 416 Hong Kong dollars at the kitchen door. Thud. The wood splintered. Thud. The door flew open. Two beams of light cut through the dark kitchen. Two silhouettes. I didn't wait to see the whites of their eyes. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle coughed quietly. The lead man grunted, spinning around as rounds impacted his vest. He didn't drop, body armor. High grade. My 5.56 rounds were punching, but not penetrating the ceramic plates. Contact front, one of them yelled. They opened fire. The kitchen exploded in noise. Bullets tore through the stainless steel prep tables, sparking and whining as they ricocheted. I dove behind the heavy oak island, covering my head as debris rained down. This wasn't a precision strike anymore. It was a firefight. I popped up, aiming for the legs, the pelvic girdle. Armor doesn't cover that. Pfeft. The first man screamed and collapsed, his leg buckling under him. His partner dragged him back into the hallway, laying down suppressing fire that chewed up the wood paneling inches from my face. Suppressing, the second man roared. I didn't stick around to trade shots. I turned and sprinted up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. My ribs screamed in protest, a hot knife of pain in my side, but the adrenaline masked it. I caught up to Tessa on the second-floor landing. She was huddled in the corner, clutching the pistol I gave her like a lifeline. They're inside, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know, I said, checking the magazine. 20 rounds left. Not enough for a siege. We need to get to the wine cellar. It's got reinforced doors and no windows. It's the only defensible position in the house. The wine cellar is in the basement. Hunter, she hissed. We just ran upstairs. I know, I said, grabbing her hand. We can't go back down the way we came. We have to use the servant's chute. The manor was old. It had a laundry chute system that ran from the top floor all the way to the basement laundry room, right next to the cellar. It was tight, dirty, and dangerous, but it was the only way down without crossing the kill zone in the main hallway. We ran down the corridor. The house was eerily quiet up here. The moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long, ghostly shadows on the Persian rugs. Every shadow looked like a man with a gun. We reached the laundry room door at the end of the hall. I kicked it open. Get in, I said, opening the small hatch of the metal chute. Tessa looked at the dark, narrow hole. Hunter, I can't fitting in there. It's too small. You're smaller than me, and I'm going in after you. Go. Feet first. Keep your arms crossed. Do not panic. She hesitated. From the bottom of the stairs, I heard voices. Clear right. Moving up. Watch your intervals. Tessa now. I whispered. She squeezed her eyes shut, hitched up her torn wedding dress, and slid into the darkness. I heard the soft whoosh of fabric against metal, then a distant thump and a pile of laundry breaking her fall. I'm down. Her voice echoed up the tube, tinny and far away. I slung the rifle across my chest, took a deep breath, and jammed myself into the opening. It was tight. My shoulders scraped against the metal sides. Gravity took over, and I plummeted. It was a terrifying 3 seconds of darkness and friction burns. I tumbled out at the bottom, landing hard on a pile of sheets next to Tessa. We were in the basement. The air here was cool and smelled of damp earth and detergent. You okay? I asked, helping her up. I think I bruised everything, she groaned, rubbing her arm. Come on. The wine cellar was just down the hall. I pushed open the heavy oak door. It was a temperature-controlled vault, lined with thousands of bottles of wine worth more than my entire military pension. But I didn't care about the vintage. I cared about the door. It was solid oak, 3 inches thick. Get in, I said. Lock it from the inside. There's a heavy iron bolt. Slide it. Where are you going? Panic spiked in her voice. She grabbed my arm. Hunter, don't leave me. I'm not leaving you, I said, cupping her face. Her skin was cold. But if I stay in there with you, we're just rats in a trap. They'll blow the door and kill us both. I have to be out here. I have to hunt them. No, she sobbed. Please, no. Tessa, look at me. I stared into her eyes. I promised to protect you. Till death do us part, right? I am going to keep that promise. But I need you to be safe while I do the work. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. If they try to get in, shoot through the door. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, then nodded. She kissed me, a desperate, hard kiss that tasted like salt and fear. Come back to me, she whispered. Always. I pushed her inside and closed the door. I heard the heavy clunk of the iron bolt sliding home. She was safe. For now. Now I could work. I moved away from the door, melting into the shadows of the basement hallway. I needed to even the odds. I had 1 rifle, limited ammo, and 4 highly trained operators hunting me. A frontal assault was suicide. I needed to separate them. I needed to make them afraid. I found the main breaker box on the wall. I flipped every switch. Clack, clack, clack. The humming of the refrigerators stopped. The faint light from the exit signs died. The basement plunged into absolute, pitch blackness. I smiled. This was my world now. I didn't have night vision goggles, but neither did they. Or at least, they weren't wearing them when they breached. If they switched to flashlights, they became targets. A beam of light in the dark is just a beacon that says, "Here is my head." I moved silently to the laundry room and grabbed a bottle of bleach and a bottle of ammonia. A crude chemical weapon. Old school. Nasty. I crept up the basement stairs, stopping just before the top. I could hear them in the main hallway above. Where did they go? A voice growled. We checked the 2nd floor. Nothing. Check the basement, another voice said. The chute. I heard something. Roger. Stacking on the basement door. Perfect. I mixed the chemicals in a plastic bucket I found, holding my breath as the toxic fumes began to rise almost instantly. Chloramine gas. It burns the eyes, the throat, the lungs. It causes panic. I tossed the bucket up the stairs. It clattered onto the landing. What was that? Gas. Gas. Back up. Coughing. Wretches. Confusion. I didn't wait. I surged up the stairs, rifle raised. The hallway was filled with white vapor. 2 mercenaries were stumbling back, clawing at their masks, their flashlights swinging wildly. They were disciplined, but they weren't expecting chemical warfare in a wedding venue. I saw a silhouette through the mist. Pfeft. Double tap. Center mass. The man dropped. 1 down. 3 to go, plus the leader. But then, a laser beam cut through the smoke. A green dot. It danced across my chest. I threw myself backward down the stairs just as a burst of automatic fire shredded the doorframe where I had been standing. He's at the stairs. Flank him. Go around the outside. I scrambled back down to the basement, my heart racing. I had taken one out, but I had revealed my position. Now they knew exactly where I was. And they knew Tessa was down here too. I retreated to the wine cellar door. I tapped on the wood. Tessa, it's me. Stay quiet. Hunter. Her voice was small, muffled. I'm here. I'm holding. I took a position behind a stack of old wine crates, aiming at the bottom of the stairs. Then, the radio in my pocket crackled. I had kept the earpiece from the first guy. Hunter, Fiona's voice came through. You're being very difficult. I didn't respond. You think you're winning because you killed a few of my employees? Do you really think you can stop what's coming? I'm going to kill every single one of them. Fiona, I said into the mic, and then I'm coming for you. She laughed. A cold, dry sound. Oh, I don't think so. You see, we found something interesting in the guest list. Your mother. She's at the nursing home in the city, isn't she? Room 304. My blood froze. We have a team en route there right now, she continued. Give up, Hunter. Walk out with your hands up, and maybe she dies painlessly in her sleep. Keep fighting. And well, old people are so fragile. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage blinded me for a second. She was threatening my mother. My sick, elderly mother who didn't even know who I was half the time. If you touch her, I growled, my voice shaking. There is no hole on this earth deep enough for you to hide in. Tick-tock, Hunter. Choose. The line went dead. I stared at the radio. I was torn. Part of me wanted to run out there, steal a car, and drive to the city. But if I left, Tessa died. If I stayed, I looked at the wine cellar door. I'm sorry, Mom, I whispered. I racked the bolt on the rifle. They were coming down the stairs. I barely had time to process the threat against my mother before the first flashbang clattered down the basement stairs. Bang! The explosion was deafening in the confined concrete space. A blinding white light seared my retinas, leaving behind a glowing afterimage that refused to fade. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine, drowning out all other sound. Disoriented, I fired blindly into the stairwell. Just suppressive fire. I needed to keep their heads down while my senses rebooted. I stumbled back, blinking tears from my eyes. The chemical gas I'd used earlier had dissipated, but the acrid smell of burnt powder and ozone hung heavy in the air. Two shadows moved at the top of the stairs. They were coming down in a stack, shield man in front, shooter behind. A ballistic shield. Damn it. My 5.56 rounds would just bounce off that like pebbles. They weren't playing games anymore. They were clearing the basement room by room. I retreated deeper into the wine cellar hallway, putting distance between me and the stairs. I needed an angle. I needed to flank them. But there was nowhere to flank. It was a straight corridor. I looked at the wine racks lining the walls. Thousands of bottles. Glass. Alcohol. I had an idea. I grabbed a bottle of expensive brandy, some French name I couldn't pronounce, and smashed the neck against the wall. The pungent smell of alcohol filled the air. I splashed the contents all over the floor in front of me. I grabbed another bottle. And another. Smash. Splash. Smash. Splash. I created a pool of high-proof alcohol about 10 feet wide in the middle of the hallway. The footsteps were getting closer. Heavy. Deliberate. Contact front. A muffled voice said from behind a shield. I pulled a lighter from my pocket. I didn't smoke, but I always carried one. Survival 101. I waited until I saw the glint of the shield rounding the corner. Come on, I whispered. The shield man stepped into the puddle. I flicked the lighter and tossed it. Whoosh. Blue flames erupted instantly, racing across the floor and engulfing the hallway in a wall of fire. Contact. Fire. The point man screamed, stumbling back. The heat was intense, instantly sucking the oxygen out of the narrow corridor. The shield man panicked. He couldn't see through the flames. He lowered the shield for a split second to retreat. That was my window. I dropped to one knee, aiming through the fire. I couldn't see a clear target, just silhouettes dancing in the inferno. I aimed for where his legs would be. Feft. A scream. The shield clattered to the floor. Man down. Man down. Pull back. They dragged their wounded comrade back up the stairs, cursing. The fire was blocking their advance, but it wouldn't last forever. The alcohol would burn off in a minute or two. I used the respite to reload. My hands were steady now. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, mechanical focus. I was a machine. Input, threat. Output, violence. I checked on Tessa. The door was still bolted. I tapped 3 times, our signal. I'm still here, I whispered. No answer. Tessa. Silence. My heart stopped. I pounded on the door. Tessa. Answer me. Still nothing. Had they breached the wall? Was there another entrance I didn't know about? I put my ear to the heavy oak. I heard sobbing. Quiet, muffled sobbing. And a voice. A man's voice. It was coming from inside the cellar. Open the door, Hunter, the voice said. Calm. Cultured. Familiar. It was Julian. My blood ran cold. How? How did he get in there? The only door was the one I was guarding. Julian. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. If you touch her, I swear to God. I'm not going to touch her, Hunter, Julian said through the wood. I don't have to. She's my client, remember? I'm just here to execute the will. What are you talking about? Open this door. You really didn't know, did you? Julian laughed. It was a slimy, arrogant sound. The estate. The money. It all goes to Tessa when she turns 30, or if her husband dies tragically. But if she dies tragically, well, then it all reverts to the next of kin. Fiona, you're working with her, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You set this up. I drafted the contracts, Julian corrected. Fiona is a blunt instrument. I'm the architect. And I've been in here the whole time, Hunter. There's a dumbwaiter in the back of the cellar. Did you miss that on your tactical assessment? I cursed myself. A dumbwaiter. A small service elevator for moving wine bottles between floors. Big enough for a slim man to squeeze through. I had locked my wife in a cage with a wolf. Let her go, Julian. You're a lawyer, not a killer. You don't have the guts for this. Maybe not, Julian replied. But I have this. I heard a struggle. Tessa screamed. No. Hunter, he has a click. The sound of a hammer being cocked. Drop the weapon, Hunter, Julian commanded. Drop the rifle and slide it away from the door. Or I blow her brains out right now. I stood there, paralyzed. The fire in the hallway was dying down, flickering out into embers. The smoke was clearing. The mercenaries upstairs would be regrouping, ready to come back down any second. And now, the enemy was behind me, holding a gun to the woman I loved. I'm waiting, Julian sang out. 3, 2. Okay. Okay, I shouted. I'm doing it. I unslung the 416 Hong Kong dollars. It felt heavy in my hands. It was my only advantage. Without it, I was just a man in a tuxedo against a kill squad. But I had no choice. I placed the rifle on the floor and kicked it. It skidded across the concrete, coming to rest against the far wall. Kick the pistol too, Julian said. I know you took one off the first guy. He was thorough. I pulled the SIG P226 from my waistband. I hesitated. Do it, Tessa screamed. Please. I kicked the pistol away. Good, Julian said. Now, open the door. Slowly. I slid the heavy iron bolt back. Clack. I pushed the door open. The wine cellar was dim. Julian stood in the center of the room, holding Tessa in front of him as a human shield. He had a small snub-nosed revolver pressed against her temple. His other hand was gripping her hair tight, pulling her head back. Tessa's face was streaked with tears and mascara. Julian looked terrified but manic. He wasn't a soldier. His hand was shaking. That made him more dangerous. An amateur with a gun is unpredictable. Hands on your head, Julian ordered, his voice cracking slightly. Turn around. Knees. I slowly raised my hands, interlacing my fingers behind my head. I looked at Tessa. I'm sorry, I mouthed. Turn around. Julian screamed. I turned my back to them and dropped to my knees on the cold concrete. Fiona, Julian shouted into a radio clipped to his lapel. I have him. He's secure. Send the team down. Excellent, Julian, Fiona's voice purred. Hold him there. The boys are coming to finish it. I closed my eyes. I listened. I could hear the boots on the stairs again. The mercenaries were coming back. They wouldn't make the same mistake twice. They would put a bullet in the back of my head the second they saw me. I had maybe 10 seconds. I focused on my breathing. In, out. I focused on the sounds behind me. Julian's breathing was ragged. He was hyperventilating. He's close. Maybe 4 feet away. You know, Hunter, Julian stammered, trying to sound tough. I always hated you. You walk around with that arrogance. Like you're better than us because you carried a gun for a living. Well, look at you now. On your knees. You're right, Julian. I said softly, staring at the wall. I did carry a gun for a living. And do you know what the first thing they teach you about hostage situations is? Shut up. They teach you. I continued, tensing every muscle in my legs. That action is faster than reaction. I said shut up. Julian pressed the gun harder into Tessa's temple. She whined in pain. That was it. The trigger. I didn't turn around. I fell forward. I threw my upper body flat against the floor, kicking my legs back like a mule. It was a desperate, acrobatic move. My heels connected with something soft, Julian's shins. "Ah!" Julian cried out, stumbling backward. His grip on Tessa loosened. The gun wavered. I rolled. I spun on my back, using the momentum to sweep my leg around. I caught his ankle. He went down hard, crashing into a wine rack. Bottles shattered, raining red wine and glass down on him. The revolver skittered across the floor. Tessa scrambled away, crawling toward the corner. I was up instantly. I lunged at Julian. He was thrashing in the broken glass, trying to reach the gun. I stomped on his hand. Hard. I felt bones crunch. "Ack!" he screamed, clutching his mangled hand. I grabbed him by the lapels of his expensive suit and hauled him up. I slammed him against the wall. "You want to play soldier, Julian?" I growled, my face inches from his. "Let's play." But before I could finish him, a shadow fell over the doorway. "Drop him," a deep voice commanded. I froze. I looked toward the door. The remaining 3 mercenaries were standing there, weapons raised, laser sights trained on my chest. The leader, a massive man with a scar running down his face, stepped forward. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Julian. "Boss said no witnesses," the leader grunted. Pop. One shot. Julian's head snapped back. He slid down the wall, a hole in his forehead. The lawyer was dead. I stood there, holding a dead man, surrounded by 3 killers. The leader looked at me. He lowered his rifle slightly. "You're good," he said, almost admiringly. "Took out 2 of my guys. Burned a 3rd one pretty bad. I respect that." He pulled a combat knife from his vest. A jagged, serrated blade. But a contract is a contract. And frankly, I'm out of ammo. He tossed his rifle aside. The other 2 men lowered their weapons, watching. He wanted a duel. He wanted to kill a seal with his bare hands. Ego. That was my only chance. "Tessa," I said, not taking my eyes off the giant. "Close your eyes." The giant grinned. "Let's dance, sailor." The wine cellar felt smaller now. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood, the sharp tang of spilled wine, and the palpable tension of imminent violence. Julian's body lay slumped in the corner, his eyes wide and vacant, a grim reminder of the stakes. The giant mercenary, let's call him Scar, stepped over the broken glass, cracking his knuckles. He was huge, easily 6'5", built like a vending machine with legs. He moved with a heavy, predatory grace. He wasn't just big, he was trained. I could see it in the way he kept his chin tucked, his hands loose but ready. "No guns," Scar growled to his 2 subordinates by the door. "If he touches a weapon, shoot him. Otherwise, this is mine." The 2 men nodded, keeping their rifles trained on me, but stepping back to give us space. They were enjoying the show. To them, I was already dead. I was just entertainment before the cleanup. I took a slow breath, centering myself. My rib was throbbing, my knuckles were raw, and I was exhausted. But exhaustion is a state of mind. Survival is a biological imperative. Tessa, I said again, my voice steady. Eyes closed. I heard a small whimper from the corner, but she turned her face to the wall, curling into a ball. Good. She didn't need to see this. Scar lunged. He didn't faint. He didn't box. He came in like a freight train, leading with a straight right hand aimed at my head. If that connected, it would take my head off. I slipped the punch, pivoting to the outside. I drove a hook into his kidney. It felt like punching a bag of wet cement. The guy was wearing soft body armor under his tactical vest. My punch did nothing but hurt my hand. He spun around with surprising speed, swinging a back fist that clipped my ear. The world tilted. I stumbled back, crashing into a wine rack. Bottles rained down, shattering on my shoulders. Scar laughed. Is that it? Is that the best the Navy has to offer? He came again. This time he tried to grab me, his massive hands reaching for my throat. If he got a grip, he would crush my windpipe. I dropped low, shooting for a double-leg takedown. I drove my shoulder into his gut, wrapping my arms around his thighs and driving forward. He barely budged. He was too heavy, his center of gravity too low. He sprawled, putting his weight on my back, forcing my face into the glass-covered floor. Shards bit into my cheek. He started raining down hammer fists on the back of my head. Thud, thud. Lights flashed in my vision. Darkness clawed at the edges of my consciousness. Get up, I screamed internally. Move or die. I released his legs and rolled, narrowly avoiding a stomp that would have shattered my spine. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for air. Blood was running into my eye from a cut on my forehead. Scar was smiling. He was enjoying this. He picked up a magnum of champagne from the rack, a heavy, thick glass bottle. He weighed it in his hand like a club. Cheers, he grunted, swinging it at my head. I ducked. The bottle smashed into the stone pillar behind me, exploding like a grenade. I needed a weapon. My hands weren't enough. I spotted it. On the floor, near Julian's body. A corkscrew. Not a flimsy pocket one, but a heavy-duty, T-handle waiter's corkscrew. I dove for it. Scar saw me move and kicked me in the ribs, the same broken ribs from earlier. Agony. Pure, white-hot agony tore through my chest. I screamed, curling up on the floor. I couldn't breathe. My diaphragm seized. Scar loomed over me. He raised his boot for the finishing stomp. Say goodnight, hero. Bang. A gunshot. Scar froze. He looked confused. He looked down at his chest. A small red flower bloomed on his tactical vest, right over his heart. Then another. And another. Bang. Bang. He staggered back, looking toward the corner of the room. I turned my head. Tessa. She was kneeling in the corner, holding the SIG P226 I had kicked away earlier. She must have crawled for it while we were fighting. Her eyes were open now. They were wide, terrified, but focused. She was holding the gun with both hands, tears streaming down her face, pulling the trigger. Scar looked at her, then back at me. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. He collapsed backward, crashing onto the floor like a felled tree. Dead. The room went silent. The two mercenaries by the door stared in shock. They hadn't expected the weeping bride to be a shooter. That split second of surprise was all I needed. I snatched the corkscrew from the floor and launched myself at the nearest mercenary, Hitman number 3. He was raising his rifle to shoot Tessa. No. I warred. I tackled him, driving the corkscrew into the gap in his armor, right into the trapezius muscle near the neck. He screamed, dropping his rifle. We grappled, slamming into the doorframe. Hitman number 4 hesitated. He had a clear shot at me, but his buddy was in the way. Clear the line of fire, he shouted. I used Hitman number 3 as a human shield, spinning him around. Hitman number 4 fired a burst. The round slammed into his partner's back. Hitman number 3 went limp in my arms, dead by friendly fire. I shoved the dead body toward Hitman number 4, using it as a battering ram. The last mercenary stumbled back under the weight of his dead comrade. I didn't let up. I closed the distance. I didn't have a weapon anymore. The corkscrew was stuck in the dead guy's neck. Hitman number 4 shoved the body aside and raised his rifle. I grabbed the barrel of the gun, pushing it toward the ceiling. A burst of fire tore into the plaster above us. I headbutt him. Hard. Right on the nose. I felt cartilage snap. He reeled back, stunned. I ripped the rifle from his hands. I spun it around. I didn't shoot him. I swung the stock like a baseball bat, connecting with his temple. He dropped like a sack of potatoes. Unconscious. I stood there, panting, the rifle in my hands. 4 men down. 1 dead by Tessa, 1 by friendly fire, 1 knocked out, and the first 2 upstairs. Wait, that was 5. I did a mental recount. Kitchen guy dead. Shield guy, burned, probably out of the fight. Scar, dead by Tessa. Friendly fire guy dead. Knocked out guy. That was 5. The team was neutralized. I looked at Tessa. She was still kneeling in the corner, the smoking pistol in her hand. She was shaking violently now, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. I dropped the rifle and ran to her. I pulled her into my arms. I got you. I whispered, rocking her back and forth. I got you. It's over. You did it. You saved my life. She sobbed into my chest, her hands clutching my torn tuxedo jacket. I killed him. I killed him. You saved us. I corrected her firmly. You did what you had to do. We sat there for a moment in the carnage of the wine cellar. But we couldn't stay. Fiona was still out there, and she would know her team had failed. We have to go, I said, helping Tessie up. We need to get to the car. We need to get the police. I grabbed the 416 Hong Kong dollars from the floor and checked the mag empty. I grabbed the one from the unconscious guy. Full mag good. I led Tessa out of the cellar, stepping over the bodies. We moved up the basement stairs, past the charred remains of the hallway fire, and into the main house. It was quiet. Too quiet. We moved toward the front door. The heavy oak doors were blown open, hanging off their hinges. Moonlight spilled into the foyer. We stepped out onto the porch. The cool night air hit my sweaty face. The driveway was empty. The mercenary vans were gone. Fiona's limo was gone. They ran. Tessa whispered, hope rising in her voice. They left. I scanned the perimeter. No movement. No red dots. Maybe, I said, not lowering my rifle. We walked down the steps toward the parking area where my car was parked, a vintage Mustang I had restored myself. It was the only car left. All the guests' cars were gone. They had fled hours ago. We made it, Tessa said, reaching for the door handle of the Mustang. Click. A floodlight blinded us. It came from the top of the detached garage, a massive, blinding spotlight that turned the driveway into day. Drop the weapon, Hunter. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. I squinted against the glare. On the roof of the garage, silhouetted against the moon, stood a figure. And next to him, another figure tied to a chair. It wasn't my mother. It was a young girl, maybe 10 years old, with a gag in her mouth. Who is that? Tessa gasped. That, the voice on the speaker said, it was Fiona. Is your niece, Tessa. Little Ruby. Remember her? From your sister's side. Tessa screamed. Ruby. No. Fiona continued. We picked her up on the way out. Insurance policy. Now, drop the gun, or the girl learns to fly. The figure on the roof pushed the chair to the very edge. One shove, and the kid would fall 20 feet onto the concrete. I looked at Tessa. She was hysterical. I slowly placed the rifle on the ground. Kick it away. I kicked it. Now, Fiona's voice crackled. Get on your knees. Both of you. We knelt on the gravel. The garage door opened slowly. Fiona walked out. She wasn't holding a radio anymore. She was holding a pistol. And walking beside her wasn't a mercenary. It was a man in a police uniform. A captain's uniform. Hunter. Fiona smiled, flanked by the corrupt cop. Meet Captain Reynolds. He's here to take your statement. Something about a domestic dispute gone wrong? A husband who snapped and killed everyone. My stomach dropped. The police weren't coming to save us. The police were the cleaners. This, I thought, looking at the captain's smirk, is going to be a problem. The gravel dug into my knees, sharp and cold. My hands were laced behind my head, muscles trembling with exhaustion and rage. Tessa knelt beside me, her sobbing reduced to quiet, terrified hitches. Captain Reynolds stood over us, his uniform pristine, the silver bars on his collar glinting in the harsh spotlight. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a community pillar. That made him worse. Sad business, Reynolds said, shaking his head with mock sympathy. Groom goes crazy on his wedding day. PTSD, they'll say. Snaps. Kills the security team, kills the family lawyer, even kills his own mother-in-law in a fit of rage before turning the gun on his wife. And finally himself. He unholstered his service weapon. A Glock 17. Standard issue. Reliable. Fiona laughed, a sound like breaking glass. It's a tragic story, really. The media will eat it up. The wedding day massacre. I'll give tearful interviews. I'll start a foundation in Tessa's name. She looked down at her daughter with pure contempt. You always were more useful to me as a symbol than a person, darling. You're sick, Tessa whispered. You're a monster. I'm a survivor, Fiona snapped. And I'm rich. Which, in this world, is the same thing. Up on the roof, the mercenary holding little Ruby shifted. The chair scraped against the shingles. Ruby whimpered through her gag, her eyes wide with terror as she stared down at the concrete drop. I had to think fast. I had no weapon. I had a corrupt police captain in front of me, a sociopathic mother-in-law to his left, and a hostage on the roof. Captain, I said, keeping my voice calm. You know this won't work, right? There are bodies everywhere. Ballistics won't match. The timeline won't make sense. Forensics will tear this story apart in 5 minutes. Reynolds chuckled. Hunter, you think I'm sending the CSI nerds out here? I run the major crimes unit. I control the crime scene. I control the evidence. By the time the lab tech gets here, this scene will look exactly how I want it to look. He raised the gun, aiming it at my forehead. The black bore looked like a tunnel to hell. Any last words, hero? I looked at Tessa. I love you, I said. She squeezed my eyes shut. How touching, Reynolds sneered. His finger tightened on the trigger. Vroom. A roar. Like a jet engine. We all froze. The sound was coming from the sky. It was getting louder. Fast. THWOP, 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 THWOP. A helicopter. A black helicopter, running dark, suddenly crested the tree line. It was flying low, nap of the earth style. It hovered directly over the driveway, the downwash kicking up a storm of dust and gravel. What the hell is that? Reynolds shouted, shielding his eyes. A spotlight from the chopper snapped on, blinding everyone. Police. Drop the weapon, a voice boomed from the sky. Federal agents. Drop it, Fiona screamed. Reynolds looked confused. This wasn't local PD. This was feds. But Reynolds didn't drop the gun. He panicked. He swung the weapon toward Tessa. No. I lunged. I didn't tackle him. I tackled Tessa, shielding her body with mine just as Reynolds fired. Bang. The bullet slammed into the gravel inches from my ear. Take the shot, the voice from the helicopter screamed. Crack. A single shot from a marksman in the chopper. Reynolds' gun hand exploded in red mist. He screamed, dropping the pistol, clutching his mangled wrist. Move, move, move. Ropes dropped from the helicopter. Men in tactical gear fast roped down to the driveway. FBI, get on the ground. Nobody moved. Fiona turned to run, but she tripped in her heels and fell face first into the dirt. 2 agents were on her instantly, zip-tying her hands. I looked up at the roof. The mercenary holding Ruby saw the feds. He realized it was over. He raised his hands. Don't shoot. I surrender. It was chaos, but it was good chaos. An agent ran over to us, helping me up. Hunter? You okay? We got a call. I looked at the agent. I didn't recognize him. Who called you? How did you know? The agent pointed toward the gate. A black sedan was speeding up the driveway, followed by 2 more FBI SUVs. The sedan screeched to a halt. The door flew open. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a sharp business suit, holding a badge. It was Tessa. I blinked. I looked down at the woman in my arms, the woman in the wedding dress who I had been protecting all night. Then I looked at the woman in the suit. They were identical. Twins. My brain short-circuited. What? The woman in my arms, the one in the wedding dress, stood up. She wiped the tears from her face. Her demeanor changed instantly. The fear vanished, replaced by a steely calm. She looked at the woman in the suit, then at me. "Sorry, Hunter," the bride said. "I couldn't tell you. It was the only way to make the fear look real." The woman in the suit walked over. "Agent Brooke Miller, FBI," she said, flashing her badge. "And that," she pointed to the bride, "is my sister, Tessa, your wife." "I don't understand," I stammered, looking between them. "You're twins." "We are," Brooke said. "But nobody knew except us. Mom separated us at birth. Tessa stayed with Mom. I went into the system. I found Tessa 3 years ago. We've been building a case against Fiona for racketeering and murder for hire ever since. Tessa, my wife, took my hand. Fiona was planning to kill me tonight, Hunter. We knew about the hit, but we needed her to commit the act. We needed to catch her red-handed, with the hit squad, with the corrupt cop. We needed undeniable proof. So you used me as bait?" I asked, a mix of anger and relief washing over me. "You let me fight for my life, for our lives, without telling me." "If you knew, you would have acted differently," Brooke interjected. "You're a SEAL. You would have gone on the offensive too early. We needed the tape. We needed Reynolds to admit to the cover-up. We needed Fiona to confess." She pointed to the bride's dress. Hidden in the lace of the bodice was a tiny black dot. A wire. "We got it all," Tessa said softly. "Every word. Every threat. It's over, Hunter. She's going away for life." I looked at Fiona. She was being dragged toward an FBI van, kicking and screaming, her perfect hair a mess, her empire crumbling. She looked at the twins, one in a dress, one in a suit, and her face went pale. She finally realized the depth of the game she had lost. "You ungrateful little wretches," Fiona shrieked. "I gave you life, and you tried to take it away," Brooke said coolly. "Get her out of here." The agents shoved Fiona into the van. I looked at Tessa. "My Tessa, the woman I married." "So," I said, wiping blood from my forehead, "you have a secret twin sister who's a federal." "Surprise," she offered a weak smile. "And you let me fight 5 hitmen with a cake knife and a corkscrew." "I knew you could handle it," she said, touching my cheek. "You're my husband." I started to laugh. It was a hysterical, exhausted laugh. I pulled her into a hug, burying my face in her neck. "Remind me," I mumbled, "never to make you angry." "Deal," she whispered. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Crack. It didn't come from the police. It came from the woods. Agent Brooke gasped and crumpled to the ground, clutching her shoulder. "Sniper!" I roared. "Get down." We scrambled for cover behind the FBI SUV. "I thought you said you got them all." I shouted at Tessa. "We did," she screamed. "Who is that?" I peered around the tire. Up on the hill, near the old water tower. A lone figure. Ghillie suit. Long rifle. It wasn't one of the mercenaries. It was a freelancer. A backup plan. Fiona had a plan B. "Brooke." Tessa crawled over to her sister. Brooke was bleeding heavily, her suit soaked in red. "She's hit." "Medic." "He's pinned us down," an agent shouted. "We can't get to the chopper." The sniper fired again. The round punched through the windshield of the SUV, showering us in glass. He was good. He was targeting the agents, keeping them suppressed so they couldn't move the prisoner or the wounded. I looked at the FBI tactical team. They were disorganized, focused on the wounded agent. They weren't hunting. "Give me a rifle," I said to the nearest agent. "Civilian, stay down," he barked. "I'm not a civilian right now," I snapped. "I'm the only one who knows this terrain. Give me the damn rifle." The agent hesitated, then tossed me his carbine. "Make it count." "Cover me," I said to Tessa. "Where are you going?" "To finish the wedding," I said. I sprinted toward the tree line, zigzagging as bullets kicked up dirt at my heels. I dove into the brush and disappeared into the night. The hunter was back in his element. The woods were my home. The FBI agents back at the driveway had training, sure, but they were urban operators. They knew how to clear rooms and breach doors. They didn't know how to move through dense undergrowth without snapping twigs. They didn't know how to read the wind in a valley. I did. I moved fast but low, a ghost in a tuxedo. The sniper on the water tower had the high ground, which gave him a commanding view of the driveway, but it also silhouetted him against the moon. Rookie mistake. Or maybe arrogance. I circled wide, flanking his position. My lungs burned, my ribs screamed with every breath, but I pushed the pain into a box and locked it away. Crack. Another shot rang out from the tower. He was still suppressing the agents, keeping them pinned while Brooke bled out. I didn't have much time. I reached the base of the hill. The water tower was an old, rusted steel structure, maybe 50 feet high. The ladder was on the north side. If I climbed it, he'd hear the vibrations. He'd just lean over and pop me. I needed a distraction. I found a rock, about the size of a baseball. I hurled it as hard as I could into the brush about 30 yards to my left. Crash thump. The sniper's head snapped toward the sound. His rifle barrel swung left. I didn't climb. I used the rusted support struts. I hauled myself up the diagonal beams, hand over hand, silent as a spider. My muscles trembled. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind pure exhaustion, but I forced my body to obey. I reached the platform. I pulled myself over the grating. He was there. Prone position. Bolt-action rifle. He was focused on the driveway, lining up another shot. Drop it, I said, leveling the FBI carbine at his back. He stiffened. He didn't turn around. Slowly, very slowly, he took his hands off the rifle. Turn around, I ordered. Slowly, he rolled onto his back. I expected another mercenary, another faceless thug. But when the moonlight hit his face, I froze. It was a kid. He couldn't have been more than 19. Acne scars on his cheeks. Terror in his eyes. He wasn't a pro. He was a recruit. A pawn. Don't shoot, he stammered, his hands shaking. Please. She said she'd pay for my college. She said it was just a job. Fiona. She didn't just hire pros. She corrupted everyone she touched. She found desperate people and turned them into weapons. You shot a federal agent, I said, my voice cold. That's not a job. That's a life sentence. I missed. I missed on purpose, he cried. I just wanted to scare them. Please. I looked at his rifle. The scope was dialed in perfectly. He hadn't missed on purpose. He missed because he was nervous. Get on your stomach, I commanded. Hands behind your back. He rolled over, sobbing. I zip-tied his hands with a plastic cuff I pulled from his own vest. You're lucky tonight, kid, I whispered. You're lucky I'm tired of killing. I grabbed his radio. I keyed the mic. FBI control. This is Hunter. The sniper is secured. The scene is safe. Get the medics to Agent Miller. Now. Copy that. Hunter. A voice crackled back. Good work. Stand by. I sat down on the edge of the water tower platform, my legs dangling over the edge. I watched the scene below. The flashing lights of the ambulances arriving. The FBI agents swarming the grounds. Tessa running alongside the stretcher as they loaded Brooke into the back. It was over. Or so I thought. A movement caught my eye. Down near the garage. While the agents were focused on the wounded and the prisoner transfer, a shadow slipped out from behind the tool shed. It was Julian. Wait. No. Julian was dead. I saw him die. I squinted. It wasn't Julian. It was the driver. The limo driver. A man I had completely forgotten about. He was moving toward the FBI van where they had stashed Fiona. The agents were distracted by the arrival of the ambulances. The back doors of the van were unguarded for a split second. The driver pulled something from his pocket. A key? A lockpick? He opened the van door. Fiona tumbled out. She didn't look like a prisoner. She looked like a coiled viper. They started running toward the woods. Toward my woods. Hey, I shouted from the tower, but the wind carried my voice away. I grabbed the sniper rifle. I looked through the scope. I had a shot. I could drop the driver. I could drop Fiona. But they were running into the dense tree line. If I missed, they'd be gone. And Fiona had offshore accounts, safe houses, contacts. If she escaped tonight, she would vanish. And she would spend the rest of her life hunting us down. I couldn't let that happen. I didn't take the shot. I dropped the rifle. I slid down the ladder, ignoring the rust biting into my palms. I hit the ground running. I wasn't going to shoot them from a distance. I was going to run them down. I sprinted into the forest, following the sound of crashing branches. They were making noise. They were panicked. I tracked them for 10 minutes. They were heading for the old logging road on the north side of the property. There would be a car waiting there, a getaway vehicle. I cut through a ravine, scrambling up a muddy bank, taking a shortcut I knew from my morning runs. I emerged onto the logging road just as a pair of headlights swept around the bend. A black SUV. It slowed down. Fiona and the driver burst out of the bushes, waving at the car. "Stop! Stop!" Fiona screamed. The car stopped. The door opened. I stepped out onto the road, directly in the headlights. I stood there, bloody, dirty, my tuxedo shredded, holding nothing but my bare hands and a whole lot of resolve. Fiona froze. She looked at the car, then at me. "Get in," the driver yelled at her. "Forget him. Get in." Fiona looked at me with pure hatred. "Run him over," she screamed at the driver of the SUV. "Kill him." The SUV revved its engine. I didn't move. The car lurched forward. The SUV's engine roared, a mechanical beast ready to charge. The headlights blinded me, turning the world into a stark contrast of white light and pitch-black shadows. I could smell the burning rubber as the tires spun on the gravel, fighting for traction. "Do it!" Fiona shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. "End him." The driver floored it. The massive vehicle surged forward, gaining speed with terrifying quickness. I didn't run. I didn't dodge. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the single flashbang grenade I had looted from the mercenary in the kitchen. I had saved it, waiting for the right moment. This was it. I pulled the pin. I held it for a 2 count. 1, 2. I threw it. Not at the car. Under it. The grenade skittered across the gravel, bouncing directly beneath the SUV's chassis just as it bore down on me. I dove into the ditch at the last possible second. Boom. The flashbang detonated in the confined space between the road and the car's undercarriage. The concussion wave was massive. It didn't blow the car up like in the movies, but the force was enough to shatter the oil pan and rupture the brake lines. More importantly, the deafening noise and blinding flash inside the cabin caused the driver to panic. He jerked the wheel hard to the right. The SUV swerved, lost traction on the loose gravel, and slammed sideways into a massive oak tree with a sickening crunch. Metal crumpled. Glass exploded. The horn blared continuously, a long, dying wail. Steam hissed from the radiator. Silence returned to the forest, broken only by the stuck horn. I climbed out of the ditch, wiping mud from my eyes. I walked over to the wreck. The driver was slumped over the airbag, unconscious. Fiona was gone. I looked around. The passenger door was open. She had bailed out just before impact or scrambled out immediately after. I saw a trail of blood on the leaves. She was hurt. "Give it up, Fiona," I yelled into the darkness. There's nowhere to go. No answer. Just the wind in the trees. I followed the blood trail. It led deeper into the woods, toward the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The end of the line. I found her at the edge. It was a sheer drop, 200 feet down to the jagged rocks and churning black water below. The moon reflected off the waves, cold and unforgiving. Fiona stood with her back to the void. She was holding her arm, blood seeping through her fingers. Her dress was torn, her hair wild. She looked like a cornered witch. But she wasn't alone. She was holding something. A remote detonator. "Stay back," she screamed, her eyes manic. "Stay back, or I blow it." I stopped 10 feet away. "Blow what, Fiona?" "The house. It's already cleared. Everyone is out." Not the house, she hissed, a cruel smile twisting her lips. The car. Tessa's car. The one she's sitting in right now, waiting for you. My heart stopped. Tessa had run back to the Mustang, while I chased Fiona. I rigged it. Fiona laughed, a sound that bordered on madness. Plan C. If I couldn't have the money, nobody could. The moment I press this button, my darling daughter becomes a firework. I stared at the detonator in her hand. It was a simple RF trigger. One button. Instant death. You're lying, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You wouldn't kill her. She's your leverage. She's a liability. Fiona spat. She betrayed me. She wore a wire. She brought the feds. She's dead to me anyway. Her thumb hovered over the button. Don't do it, Fiona, I said, taking a slow step forward. You press that, and there is no deal. There is no prison. I will throw you off this cliff myself. I'm not going to prison, Hunter, she whispered. I'm going out on my terms. She pressed her thumb down. Click. Nothing happened. No distant explosion. No fireball rising from the estate. Fiona frowned. She pressed it again. Click. Click. Why isn't it working? She screamed, shaking the remote. Because I disconnected the battery in the Mustang before the wedding, a voice said from behind me. I turned. Tessa walked out of the tree line. She was limping, holding her side, but she was upright. She was holding the keys to the Mustang in her hand. I know you, Mother, Tessa said, her voice hard as diamond. I know you always have a backup plan. I checked the car this morning. I found the C4 under the seat. I cut the receiver wire. Fiona stared at her daughter. The realization hit her. She had been outsmarted. Not by a soldier, not by the FBI, but by the daughter she had underestimated her entire life. You, Fiona whispered. You ruin everything. It's over, Mom, Tessa said. Step away from the edge. Fiona looked at the remote, then at Tessa, then at the drop behind her. No, Fiona said softly. It's never over. She dropped the remote. She looked at me one last time. Take care of her, Hunter. She's just like me. More than you know. And then, she leaned back. No, Tessa screamed, lunging forward. I grabbed Tessa, pulling her back just as Fiona tipped over the edge. She didn't scream. She fell silently into the darkness. We rushed to the edge and looked down. Nothing but the crashing waves and the white foam against the black rocks. She was gone, swallowed by the sea. Tessa collapsed into my arms, sobbing. It wasn't a sob of grief. It was the release of a lifetime of control, manipulation, and fear. It's okay, I whispered, holding her tight as the ocean wind whipped around us. She can't hurt you anymore. She's gone. We stood there on the cliff's edge for a long time, watching the water, until the flashing lights of the FBI rescue team appeared in the woods behind us. The war was over. But wars leave scars. The sunrise didn't feel triumphant. It felt like a bruise healing, slow, tender, and necessary. I sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, a thick wool blanket draped over my shoulders. A medic was stitching up the cut on my forehead. The stinging of the needle was the only thing keeping me awake. Around us, the estate was a hive of activity. Crime scene tape fluttered in the morning breeze. Men in white hazmat suits were carrying body bags out of the house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 black bags lined up on the driveway. The hit squad. I watched them load the bags into the coroner's van. These men had names, families, histories. But last night, they were just obstacles. Now, they were just evidence. Hold still, the medic muttered. I flinched. Sorry. Tessa was sitting in the back of an FBI SUV a few yards away, drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup. She had changed out of her ruined wedding dress into a pair of oversized gray sweatpants and a hoodie one of the agents had given her. She looked small, fragile, but I knew better now. Agent Brooke walked over, her arm in a sling. She looked pale from blood loss, but she was smiling. They didn't find the body, Brooke said quietly, leaning against the ambulance. Coast Guard is sweeping the rocks, but the current is strong out there. Fiona is gone. She's dead, I said flatly. Nobody survives that drop. Officially? Missing presumed dead, Brooke corrected. But yeah, she's gone. She handed me a tablet. We recovered Julian's laptop from the study. It's a gold mine, Hunter. Offshore accounts, shell companies, hit contracts. Fiona wasn't just stealing from the estate. She was laundering money for a cartel. That's how she afforded the hit team. I looked at the screen. Millions of dollars. All blood money. And Reynolds. I asked. Singing like a canary, Brooks smirked. He wants a deal. He's giving us everyone. Judges, other cops, the whole network. Fiona's empire is crumbling as we speak. I nodded, feeling a heavy weight lift off my chest. It wasn't just about surviving the night. We had burned the whole infection out. I stood up, thanking the medic. I walked over to the SUV. Tessa looked up as I approached. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Hey, she whispered. Hey, I said, sitting next to her. She looked at the sunrise painting the sky in pinks and oranges. It's dawn, she said. Yeah. They're all dead, aren't they? She asked, looking at the coroner's van driving away. All 5 of them. Yeah, I said. And Julian. And I didn't say Fiona's name. She nodded slowly. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. I don't want the money, she said suddenly. The estate. The inheritance. I don't want any of it. It's poisoned. We'll sell it, I said. We'll give the money to charity. We'll start over. Somewhere new. Somewhere small. Somewhere with no cliffs, she added with a weak smile. Deal, I said. A police officer walked up to us. He looked nervous. Sir? Ma'am? We need you to come down to the station. Just for formal statements. The district attorney is waiting. I looked at Tessa. She looked exhausted. Can it wait? I asked. I'm afraid not, the officer said. It's a quintuple homicide, sir. Self-defense or not, there's a process. I sighed. The fighting was done, but the legal battle was just beginning. It's okay, Tessa said, standing up. Let's go. Let's finish this. She walked toward the police cruiser, head held high. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the survivor. As I followed her, I looked back at the house one last time. The sun was fully up now, illuminating the shattered windows and the scorched grass. It looked like a war zone. They wanted a funeral, I muttered to myself. I gave them a war. I got into the car. The interrogation room was cold, smelling of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the cliffside. Here, everything was sterile, calculated. I sat on a metal chair, my hands uncuffed, but resting heavily on the table. Across from me sat District Attorney Sterling. He wasn't a corrupt cop like Reynolds. He was a bureaucrat, a man who saw the world in black and white, law and disorder. And right now, he was looking at a man who had left 6 bodies at a wedding venue. Let's go over it again, Mr. Hunter, Sterling said, tapping a pen against a thick file. You claim self-defense. For all 6 deaths. 5 combatants, 1 facilitator. I corrected him, my voice raspy. And yes, they breached the perimeter. They initiated fire. I returned it. With a cake knife, a corkscrew, and a stolen rifle. Sterling raised an eyebrow. It reads like an action movie script, not a police report. I didn't choose the weapons, I said calmly. I used what was available. Sterling sighed. Look, I believe you. The FBI believes you. Agent Miller, your sister-in-law, has corroborated the hit squad's background. We know they were mercenaries. But the media? They're going to have a field day. The Wedding Butcher. That's the headline they're running right now. He slid a tablet across the table. A news feed was playing. A reporter stood outside the estate gates. Questions remain about the groom's mental state. Sources say he was a highly trained operative. Was this excessive force? Or necessary survival? I pushed the tablet away. I don't care about the headlines. Am I being charged? Sterling leaned back. Technically? No. But we have a problem. The recording. What recording? The wire Tessa wore, Sterling said. It got damaged during the firefight. The audio is corrupted. Without that tape proving Fiona ordered the hit. Well, without a confession, A good defense lawyer could argue you provoked the attack, that you escalated a security dispute into a massacre. My jaw tightened. A security dispute? They had suppressors and body armor. And they're all dead, Sterling pointed out. Dead men tell no tales. And dead men can't be cross-examined. Reynolds is talking, but his testimony is tainted because he's looking for a plea deal. We need something solid. Something that proves intent before the first shot was fired. The door opened. Tessa walked in. She was flanked by Agent Brooke, whose arm was heavily bandaged. We have it, Tessa said. Sterling looked up. Have what? The intent, Tessa said. She placed a small, silver object on the table. It was a digital voice recorder. Not the wire she wore, a different one. I knew the wire might fail, Tessa said, looking at me, or that she might find it. So I hid this in the bridal suite, in the flower arrangement on her vanity. She made a call before the ceremony, before she came down to give the toast. Tessa pressed play. Fiona's voice filled the small room. Clear, arrogant, chilling. Yes, Julian. It's done. The team is in position. Remember, Hunter dies first. Make it messy. I want Tessa to see it. I want her broken before we frame her. And make sure the will is on the desk. Once she signs, kill her. Burn the house. We'll blame it on the groom's PTSD. It's perfect. Silence filled the room. That wasn't just evidence. That was a smoking gun. It proved premeditation. It proved conspiracy. It proved I was the target, not the aggressor. Sterling let out a long breath. He closed his folder. Well, he said, a small smile touching his lips. That clears that up. He stood and extended his hand. You're free to go, Mr. Hunter. The state considers this matter closed. Justifiable homicide. Defense of others. You're a hero, son. Even if the papers don't say it yet. I shook his hand, but I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt tired. We walked out of the station into the blinding afternoon sun. The paparazzi were swarming the steps, cameras clicking like a wall of locusts. Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter. Did you kill them all? Tessa. How does it feel to lose your mother? I put my arm around Tessa, shielding her face. Brooke stepped in front of us, flashing her badge. Back off. Federal agents. Clear a path. We pushed through the crowd to the waiting car. We got in and slammed the door, shutting out the noise. Where to? The driver asked. I looked at Tessa. She rested her head on my shoulder, closing her eyes. The airport, I said. Anywhere but here. We didn't just leave the city, we left the life. We sold the manor. We sold the penthouse in the city. We sold the cars, the jewelry, the art, everything that had Fiona's fingerprints on it. We liquidated an empire of blood and bought something priceless, peace. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of a small cabin in the mountains of Montana. No ocean, no cliffs, just endless pines and snow-capped peaks. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine needles and wood smoke. I watched Tessa in the garden. She was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, dirt on her hands, planting bulbs for next spring. She looked different. The fear that used to live behind her eyes was gone. The shadow of her mother was finally lifted. She stood up, wiping her brow, and saw me watching. She smiled. It was a real smile. Not the practiced, polite smile of a socialite, but the warm, genuine smile of a woman who was free. Coffee's ready, she called out. I walked down the steps, my limp almost gone now. My ribs had healed, though they still ached when it rained, a permanent reminder of the wine cellar. We sat on the bench, sipping the hot coffee in silence. It was a comfortable silence. Brooke called, Tessa said softly. Oh. I took a sip. How is she? Good. Her shoulder is fully healed. She got a promotion. Assistant director now. Tessa paused. She said they found something washed up on the coast. A piece of a red dress. I stopped. I looked at her. Just a piece of fabric? I asked. Just fabric, Tessa confirmed. No body. But the file is closed. Officially. I looked out at the tree line. In my line of work, no body usually meant not dead. But Fiona had fallen 200 feet into freezing, rocky water. Even if she survived the impact, the hypothermia would have taken her in minutes. But even if she had survived, let her come. I wasn't the prey anymore. I reached down and patted the dog sleeping at my feet, a massive German shepherd named Shadow, a retired military working dog I adopted. He lifted his head, ears perking up, scanning the woods. Let the past stay dead, I said. We have a future to build. Tessa leaned her head on my shoulder. Do you miss it? She asked. The action? Being a soldier? I looked at the scar on my hand. I thought about the adrenaline, the clarity of combat. Then I looked at my wife, safe and happy in her garden. I'm still a soldier, I said, kissing the top of her head. I just have a different mission now. Protecting this. She squeezed my hand. And you're doing a great job, sailor. The wind rustled through the pines. For the first time in my life, I didn't scan the perimeter for threats. I just watched the sunset. They wanted to destroy us. They wanted to bury us under lies and violence. But they forgot the most important rule of war. You can't defeat an enemy who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. We won. Wait, before you go, I have a question for you. If you were in Hunter's shoes, standing on that cliff with the woman who tried to destroy your life, would you have tried to save her like Tessa did? Or would you have let her fall? Be honest. I want to know what real justice looks like to you. And hey, I'm building this channel for you. Tell me in the comments, what kind of story do you want next? A military revenge thriller? A psychological mystery? A dark family secret? Let me know your favorite genre, and I'll write the next epic saga just for you. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next thrill ride. Until next time, stay safe, watch your six, and keep the secrets buried deep.